In the winter of 1923, a sealed trunk was found beneath the floorboards of a condemned farmhouse in Wiscasset, Maine. Inside, a single daguerreotype photograph, undated, unsigned, and chemically preserved in a way no laboratory could replicate. It showed 4 girls dressed in black morning gowns, their skin chalk white, their pupils barely visible. The strangest part, the back of the photo was scorched, as though someone had tried to burn it, yet the image remained untouched. When the photo was sent to the Maine Historical Society, an archivist recognized the girls. They matched a painting stored in the cellar of St. Eustace Orphanage, an institution burned to the ground in 1853 with no survivors. Their names were whispered only in fragments: Lydia, Caroline, Mercy, Ilwan, 4 sisters allegedly born under impossible circumstances on the same day, in the same hour, during a blood eclipse in 1845. The trunk was sent for study, but 2 researchers who opened it died within a month. One had clawed his own eyes out, and from there the silence began. It was the night of October 13th, 1845, when the sky above coastal Maine turned the color of dried blood. The moon was swallowed by shadow, and fishermen along the Penobscot River reported the tides reversing for several minutes, dragging boats inland, then flinging them back into the bay. That same night, in a collapsing clapboard farmhouse outside Damariscotta, midwife Ann Larkins delivered 4 girls to a woman who had been presumed barren. Her name was Marguerite Ashcroft, a recluse who hadn't left her property in nearly a decade. Witnesses, though few, claimed something was wrong with the birth. The infants weren't screaming, their skin was cold but not dead, and when Anne cut the cord of the 4th child, the candles in the room blew out, despite there being no wind. The next morning, Marguerite was found in the cellar, cradling the newborns, and speaking in a language no one could identify. Anne refused to ever speak of that night again, and within weeks, she vanished from town altogether. The townspeople said nothing, they only avoided the Ashcroft property, but in hushed tones the phrase "they didn't come from her" began circulating, and that phrase would outlive the family itself. The Ashcroft farmhouse still stands, rotting vine-choked, its roof half-collapsed. Locals say it refuses to fall completely, as if some invisible force is holding it upright. In 1846, just months after the birth, townspeople noticed something else. No sound ever came from inside. No laughter. No crying, not even the creak of floorboards in winter. Neighbors swore the girls never grew. At 5 months, they still looked like newborns, pale, wide-eyed, motionless. And when the local physician was finally forced to inspect them under town pressure, he returned home in silence, burned his notes, and resigned the next day. But there was one boy who dared approach. Timothy Mars, 12 years old, dared his friends to touch the front door. He went alone. He never spoke again. His mother said she found him that night kneeling in the barn, whispering in a woman's voice, but it wasn't hers. The townspeople called them the Ghost Sisters. Others said they weren't sisters at all, that what lived in that house only wore the shape of children. Whatever they were, it became clear, they weren't aging. But they were learning, and by their 2nd year, people began to disappear. It started with animals, barn cats first, then chickens, goats, even a black mare named Esther. Each time, the owners would find something left behind, a perfectly spiraled pile of bones, stripped clean, as if boiled, but with no signs of fire. Then came the children. In the fall of 1847, 2 boys, Elias and Jonathan Fielding, wandered near the Ashcroft property after school. They never came home. A search party combed the forest, the marshes, even the nearby riverbanks. Nothing, except for one thing. Their shoes were found at the base of a pine tree, neatly placed, facing the Ashcroft house. By the time the 3rd child disappeared, whispers had turned to terror, but any who tried to act, who demanded the family be evicted, the house burned, met strange fates, sickness, madness, suicide, or simply vanishing. Sheriff Alden Crowther attempted to issue a formal inquiry. He knocked on the Ashcroft door on the morning of December 3rd, 1847. He was never seen again. Only his badge was found, buried 6 inches deep in the garden soil. The earth was dry, but the metal was soaked in blood, and still the sisters never aged, not a single day. In early 1848, the Diocese of Portland dispatched 3 clergymen to investigate the Ashcroft matter quietly. Their reason, not public concern, but a letter, unsigned, unmailed, and found in the confessional booth of St. Bede's Church, 60 miles away. It read only, "They wear the face of the innocent, but they were never born, they were brought." The priests, Father Bellamy, Father Corcoran, and Brother Lucianer, arrived without ceremony. They entered the Ashcroft property at dusk and stayed through the night. What happened inside has never been confirmed. But at dawn, only Father Bellamy emerged, barefoot, filthy, and weeping uncontrollably. He spoke one phrase before collapsing: "There are not 4. The church sealed the property that day, claiming it as holy land under divine investigation. Locals were forbidden to approach, and anyone who did was threatened with excommunication. Rumors swirled that the Vatican had been alerted. The Ashcroft house remained dark, no movement, no noise, but townsfolk swore they saw faces in the upstairs windows, watching. Identical faces, and sometimes more than 4. Then, one night, the building rang with a sound no one had heard before. Laughter, high, hollow, and wrong. What happened next was not law, it was doctrine. The church didn't destroy the Ashcroft house, they enclosed it. A high wooden barricade, 12 feet tall, was built around the structure within days, funded in silence. Behind it, priests in plain robes patrolled by torchlight, never speaking to one another. Locals called it the Ring of Silence. No official records exist of the girls being removed from the property. In fact, no records exist at all, as if the diocese had erased its own involvement. But inside that perimeter, the church began conducting containment rituals. What these entailed, no one knows, but each morning, ashes were seen drifting up from within the walls, white like bone dust. And once, in the spring of 1849, a red mist seeped over the top and settled for hours across the valley. Every child who inhaled it developed recurring nosebleeds and a compulsion to dig holes in their sleep. Meanwhile, the townspeople who remembered the Ashcroft girls began dying off fast, not by murder or plague, but by sudden violent collapse, brains hemorrhaging, hearts stopping in mid-sentence. Whispers spread that just remembering their faces was enough to open something that should have stayed closed. In 1850, a fire consumed St. Eustace Orphanage, 20 miles north of Damariscotta. It burned with such intensity that even the stone bell tower cracked in half. All 27 children perished. Not a single body was recovered intact. But something was saved. A scorched ledger, half fused to the wood of the orphanage desk, was discovered during cleanup. Inside were names, dates, and handwritten notes from the headmistress, as well as 4 entries, each marked with a red cross, and each corresponding to the Ashcroft sisters. But the details were wrong. The names matched Lydia, Caroline, Mercy, Ilwan, but the dates of arrival 1813, 32 years before their recorded birth. And the final note under their file was nearly illegible, burned and blackened. Except for one line, they arrived in the snow, no carriage, no footsteps. They knew the hymns before they were taught. There was no mention of adoption or relocation. Yet every staff member listed under their care died before 1820 of seizures, strokes, or suicides, and then silence until the Ashcroft birth in 1845. How could the same 4 girls appear again, unchanged? Not older, not younger, exactly the same, unless they never left, unless they never died. The town of Bristol, 7 miles from the Ashcroft property, had a thriving parish in the 1840s Our Lady of the Narrow Gate. Known for its children's choir, it was one of the few places untouched by the Ashcroft fear, until May 11th, 1851. That Sunday during Mass, the choir began to sing a hymn not in the bulletin. The melody was strange, minor key, dissonant, and utterly unfamiliar. The congregation froze. Even the priest, Father Martin, stood silent as the song wove itself through the chapel. One witness later said it felt like the sound of a lullaby meant to be sung over graves. Midway through the second verse, the children's eyes rolled back, their mouths still moving. Several adults tried to intervene, but could not move. Not one soul could rise from their pew. And then, with no warning, every choir child turned, walked in unison out of the church, and vanished into the forest. All 12 were later found, in the pond behind the chapel, submerged, dressed in their choir robes. Hands folded over their chests as if they had willingly lain down and drowned. But here's the horror, not one robe was wet. In late 1851, a man arrived in town. Thin, gray-bearded, dressed in a long oilskin coat, he carried no luggage, only a stack of leather-bound journals and a brass device shaped like a compass with no needle. He introduced himself as Professor Hollis Vex, a private naturalist from Providence, Rhode Island. But the townspeople quickly realized he never asked about the land, the weather, or the animals, only the girls, always the girls. He spoke to no one directly. Instead, he pinned notes to doors, left small diagrams carved into wood, and scattered salt in perfect circles near the church, the orphanage ruins, and the schoolhouse. At night, children said they saw him staring at the Ashcroft house from a nearby hill, holding up the brass compass as if listening. When pressed, he claimed to be mapping resonant absences. What alarmed locals most was what he said in the tavern on the third night. "You don't get it. They're not haunting the house is haunting us. It remembers more than we do." 3 days later, Professor Vex was found at the base of the church bell tower. His spine had been broken in 17 places. He had written the word echo 111 times in his journal. In the dead of winter 1852, a thaw struck unexpectedly. Ice melted overnight, flooding fields and cellars. The pond behind Our Lady of the Narrow Gate overflowed, and that's when it began. The bell rang. 3 soft chimes, low and hollow, from beneath the water. No rope, no mechanism. The church bell had been dismantled months earlier after Father Martin was found unresponsive, mouth filled with mud, whispering. They hum beneath the skin, but the sound carried for miles. Those who heard it felt an unbearable pressure behind the eyes. 7 people were blinded. 2 others tore at their ears until they bled. But worse was what followed, the dreams. Townsfolk dreamed of the Ashcroft sisters, but not as children. In the dreams, they appeared as thin, robed figures with porcelain faces, mouths stitched shut, moving backwards through doorways. One farmer swore he saw them at the edge of his bed, whispering without sound, their hands pressed against the air as though reaching through glass. The next day, his livestock was found butchered with surgical precision, every organ missing, every cavity filled with pond water. 3 drops of blood were left on the barn door. Arranged in a perfect triangle, on August 3rd, 1852, for the first time in nearly 7 years, something changed inside the Ashcroft house. A witness, Jonah Bell, a stonemason working the perimeter wall, reported seeing a figure leave through the back door. A girl no older than 10, pale, barefoot with silver, blonde hair and a white ribbon tied around her wrist. She looked directly at him and then vanished mid-step into the tree line. The priests assigned to the Ring of Silence entered the house that evening. Only 3 came back out. One tore off his robe, screaming that the mercy has been removed. Another wept openly. The third refused to speak at all. By morning, news had reached Portland. The girl seen was confirmed to be Mercy Ashcroft, but none could say how she had left the house or where she had gone. Her sisters remained inside. That night, lightning struck the Ashcroft property 17 times in a single hour. Each bolt struck the same point, the chimney which never once cracked. The church claimed the house was now unsealed, and the barrier was tripled in height, but whispers among the clergy began spreading. Mercy wasn't missing. She had been taken back, by what, they never said. After Mercy's disappearance, the church sent a woman instead of priests. Sister Honoria, age 33, fluent in Latin, Aramaic, and ancient Enochian. No records of her place of birth exist. Her superiors claimed she was prepared for entities beyond nature. She entered the Ashcroft house on the eve of All Saints' Day, 1852. She stayed inside for 6 days. On the 7th, the front door swung open. Sister Honoria walked out, silent, serene, hands folded beneath her habit. But the people of Damariscotti knew something was wrong the moment they saw her eyes. They were gone. Not damaged, not injured, just missing, smooth skin where sockets should have been. She was taken to St. Bede's Infirmary. A physician who examined her said her body was biologically alive, but unresponsive. She didn't eat. She didn't blink, but she hummed constantly, a single tune, 4 notes, the same 4 notes from the drowned choir, and in her palm, clenched so tightly her nails had embedded in her flesh, was a ribbon. White, damp, tied in a perfect loop. Later that week, a patient on the floor below leapt from a window, muttering, "There's not one mercy, there are many mercies, and they all want back in." By the start of 1853, something began to unravel in Damariscotti memory itself. Entire families claimed never to have heard of the Ashcrofts. School teachers omitted them from local history. Parish records that once mentioned the sisters were blank or replaced with illegible ink blots. The word Ashcroft vanished from directories, land deeds, even gravestones. It was as if the town was being rewritten, but not erased, redirected. Anyone who spoke the sisters' names out loud would forget doing so within minutes. One constable who tried to write the word mercy in his logbook found his hand paralyzed until he wrote Mary instead. Psychiatrists today would call it mass repression, but this was no psychological quirk. It was systematic subtraction. One survivor of this fog was Margaret Whitlow, a schoolgirl who secretly kept a journal. She documented the confusion around her, the blank stares, the vanished conversations. She wrote, "The grown-ups forget, but the children remember. We see them in our dreams, we draw them in the dirt without meaning to. One girl said they teach her songs when she sleeps." Margaret was last seen walking into the woods behind the schoolyard, following a trail of white ribbons tied to trees. She never came back. In 1903, 50 years after the town was said to have forgotten, a renovation at the ruins of St. Bede's Church unearthed something no one could explain. Behind the crumbled altar, beneath layers of brick and plaster, workers discovered a hollow cavity sealed with wax and rosary wire. Inside were 14 letters, bound with twine. All unsigned, all written in the same trembling hand. Each was addressed to someone who did not exist. Names like Elira, Thasha, mother of Roots, and my twin of the mirror. None of them mentioned the Ashcrofts directly, but every letter carried fragments of the same obsession, the preservation of something ancient within the shape of children. In one passage, the bodies are fragile, but they remember the rituals. They hum before they speak. They fold time with their fingers. I do not know what they are, but I know they are older than this soil. Another letter referenced the sister who was taken back, an unmistakable nod to mercy. The writer claimed that her departure caused the seal to thin, and warned that if one more left, the others would follow, but not as girls. The last line of the final letter simply read, "They were not born, they were worn." It happened in the early hours of November 9th, 1905. For over 50 years, no one had seen movement in the Ashcroft house. The church had ceased its patrols. Locals avoided the hill entirely. But that morning, a railway worker named Edward Klein, checking the frost lines near the old forest, spotted a girl walking barefoot along the tracks. She looked 10 years old, pale, white gown, a red ribbon tied to her wrist. When he called out, she turned and smiled, not like a child, like something pretending to be one. Edward dropped his lantern and ran. But by the time he returned with help, there were no tracks in the snow. Within days, reports spread across 3 counties, girls standing in fields at night, humming strange lullabies, infants found silent in their cribs, eyes wide and unblinking. One woman miscarried in her 6th month, only for the hospital to find no fetus, just ribbons, wet, folded, knotted. The church refused comment, but deep within its archives, a single file was unsealed, marked "Second Departure Confirmed Ilwan." And beneath that, in red ink, the shape weakens, the voices multiply, containment failing. One sister gone, now 2, and no one had seen the others, but they were watching. By 1920, the Ashcroft farmhouse should have collapsed. It had endured 75 Maine winters, unchecked by repair or occupancy. But somehow the structure stood, walls upright, glass unbroken, the roof bowing but never breaking. Several academics visited the site that year, part of a secretive group from Miskatonic University's Folklore division. Among them was Dr. Halbridge Sin, a linguist with a fascination for pre-human scripts. He claimed the house was not merely resistant to decay, it was sustained by it. He described the peeling paint, warped boards, and rusted hinges as a kind of disguise, a theatrical skin. What disturbed him most were the symbols etched beneath the wallpaper. When stripped away, the students uncovered spirals, mirrored text, and diagrams that bore no resemblance to any known language. But Dr. Sin made one catastrophic error. He attempted translation. His journal shows only 4 lines before it stops. Not voices, echoes, not girls, vessels. They remember the first world. The door is inside their faces. He vanished the next morning. His assistant was found catatonic in the barn, eyes fixed on the upstairs window, whispering, "They don't grow, they wait." And from that day forward, the house began humming. In the winter of 1921, doctors at the Penobscot Valley Sanatorium documented an outbreak of night terrors among its youngest patients. Children, unrelated from different counties, awoke screaming the same phrases, "She's knocking on the walls of my face. Don't answer the door inside your dream. She's almost out, the smiling one." Drawings made by the children showed 4 identical girls standing under a blood-red moon, holding hands, but one, always the one on the left, was drawn with a face missing, blank, smooth, open. Psychiatrists believed it a mass hallucination, possibly triggered by local folklore. But one intern, Dr. Marion Bell, kept private notes. She noticed the dreams only afflicted children born in autumn, and only those with a particular birthmark, a small red triangle behind the left ear. When Dr. Bell traced these children's family trees, she found something chilling. Every single one descended from survivors of Damariscotta in 1853. The dreams worsened. Some children began sleepwalking in perfect synchrony, their mouths moving as if in prayer. One was found writing in Enochian. Another pulled out her own teeth to make room for mercy. Then one girl whispered, "When the third leaves, we'll all remember again." On July 7, 1923, 8 years after the blood eclipse of 1845, a fisherman dragging nets along the mouth of the Damariscotta River brought up something no one could explain, a coffin made of polished white stone, sealed with wire, cold as ice, and inscribed with 3 symbols. Inside was a girl, preserved perfectly, 10 years old, blonde hair, a blue ribbon tied to her wrist. Her body bore no decay, no bloating, no scent of death, only a faint smile, as if dreaming something beautiful, or remembering something terrible. Doctors claimed it was an elaborate hoax, but the fisherman, Miles Devereux, insisted he never saw it fall in. "It rose up into the net," he said, "like it had been waiting to be taken." When he returned home that night, his wife found him kneeling in the attic, head tilted up, eyes gone, in his hand a page from the burned cint. Eustace ledger, no one could explain how it got there. The name Caroline Ashcroft was written on the back. Church archives now confirm it. The third sister had departed, and all over New England, children began singing again. The same note him, the same warning hum. The echo was growing louder. After the third departure, researchers, priests, and occultists from as far as Europe descended upon Maine. Most returned empty-handed. A few did not return at all, but one group, led by ethnographer Elias Rook, was granted rare access to the now abandoned Ashcroft house in the winter of 1925 under armed church escort. Inside, they found no furniture, no dust, no insects. The entire house was perfectly preserved, as if caught in a moment that refused to pass. But in the upstairs bedroom, where 4 iron beds once stood, there was now only a single chair facing the window, and in that chair sat the last sister, Ilwan, unmoving, unblinking, her face identical to the photo from 1845, same skin, same eyes, but her mouth had been stitched shut with thin silver thread. She did not move when approached. But when Elias touched her shoulder, her eyes rolled back, and every mirror in the house shattered simultaneously. The observers dropped to their knees, vomiting, weeping, some clawing at their own skin. Only Elias stayed standing. He later wrote, "She was never a girl, she was a knot, a seal, the thing that kept the others in, but she is unraveling." The church sealed the house again that night. But it was already too late. It is now 1945, 100 years since the 4 Ashcroft sisters appeared during the blood eclipse. The farmhouse still stands. Locals say the air around it feels wrong. Cold in July. Wet in drought. Children who stray too close develop migraines and mutter names they've never heard. 3 years ago, a group of geology students from Bowdoin College camped near the Ashcroft property. None of them survived the night. Their tent was found twisted into a spiral, their bodies never recovered, and now across Maine, the humming has returned, faint, yes, but rising, always 4 notes. Always from the mouths of children too young to speak, and worse, some adults now hear it too, in dreams, in phone static, in the spaces between songs. The church denies everything. The Vatican has closed all files. And the last living member of the Ashcroft family, a nun named Sister Marian, died last year in a locked cell, having bitten off her own tongue. Her final words were carved into her wall with a rosary cross. They were not born, they were worn, and now they are waking. 3 sisters have departed, and the 4th, she's still watching, still waiting, and science still refuses to study her.